going on, people? We're in week 3 of our series, Unwrapped. Man, we are getting closer and closer to Christmas Day. And being closer to Christmas Day, that means that Christmas gifts are about to happen, about to be opened. Now, when it comes to Christmas gifts, you're either kind of one of 3 ways. Maybe you're very precise in the gifts that you get during Christmas, or maybe you're like me. Maybe you're the basic person. You know what? Let's get the Amazon gift cards. Let's get the socks. Let's get maybe the sweater. Very, very basic when it comes to Christmas gifts. Or maybe you're the last person. Maybe you love surprises. Maybe you see a box and you're ready to open it, and you're wanting the surprise to be the new Xbox or PlayStation. You love looking inside and surprised by what's inside. Christmas. It's around the corner. It's going to be here sooner than you know it. Let me ask you this question. This question I want you to think about as we talk today. What do you hear when you hear the word rejoice? What comes to mind? So we're in our 3rd week of the series called Unwrapped, and we're talking about this conversation of what this season is all about. And the season is all about Advent. And in the 1st week of the series, we talked about how we have to be ready to receive God's gift. The gift that God gives us, though, isn't just a thing. This gift that God gives us is actually a person, and that person is Jesus. Last week, we talked about how that we can share the gift with others, even if we don't feel like we're qualified to do it. So this week, we're going to talk about the gift that God has given us and why God calls us to rejoice with this gift. Last week in Matthew chapter 3, verse 1 through 11, we talked about ordinary people, just like you and I, who are responsible for sharing the good news, God's gift to the world all over their communities. You see, these people weren't experts. These people were just like you and I, and they were impacted by what they saw in Jesus. They did tell other people about him. We also talked last week about a prophet by the name of John the Baptist, and how John the Baptist shared the gift of Jesus with other people. You see, John the Baptist came onto the scene and he began his ministry and he began his teachings, and God used John to prepare the hearts for the message that Jesus was going to share. Unlike the ordinary people who shared the news of Jesus with others, John was actually what we would not call ordinary. You see, first of all, John didn't look very ordinary. He lived in a desert. He wore the clothes of camel skin, and most of all, he ate bugs. He simply ate bugs. But beyond his appearance, John's message wasn't very ordinary either, and he preached some things that we find in Matthew chapter 3. You see, why was John's message so extraordinary? You see, first, John was claiming that the thing that Israel had been searching for hundreds of years was finally here. They had been waiting for peace and for a Savior who would change everything. And according to John the Baptist, the Savior was here. And that right there is huge news. Second, this news was surprising because God's people, they were expecting the Savior to come, but the Savior was going to be a powerful king, an important political leader, not someone who was going to be announced by a guy who lived in the desert, wore camel skin, and ate bugs. And third, John's telling these people that they had to change the way that they lived. He told them, he said, listen, prepare your hearts and start acting differently. Because this Messiah that we've talked about, we've waited for, he's going to change our lives. You see, that was all good, but religious people, the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, these group of religious people, they didn't believe that. You see, in order for God to accept you according to them, you had to follow these rules, and he had to have everything figured out when it came to God. You had to kind of basically check all of the boxes off. You see, the religious leaders didn't believe John's message, so they did what they did best. They stirred up a mess. They created this whole mess and they threw John in jail. And can you imagine how sad he was, how down he was? But here he is, in jail, and he finally gets some good news. Matthew chapter 11, verse 1 through 6, John had heard all of the great things that Jesus was doing and how Jesus' ministry was truly a fulfillment of what he had been told was going to come. The message that God had asked John to share was actually coming true by what Jesus was doing. And I don't know what's going on in the mind of John during this time. I mean, he's in jail, he's in prison, he's being possibly tortured, there's an impending death. Maybe he needed some reassurance. Maybe he needed some reassurance. Maybe he was a little surprised that the Savior of the world was also his cousin. So John asked his followers to go talk to Jesus and make sure that he was the Savior John had believed him to be. And it says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 1 through 6, it says this: after Jesus had finished instructing his disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. When John was in prison, he heard about the deeds of the Messiah, and he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who's come, or should we expect someone else?" Jesus goes on and replies, he says, "Go back and report to John what you see and what you hear. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." The news was so good, almost too good to be true, that maybe John couldn't help it to be surprised how true it really was. Jesus tells the disciples that John was right all along and that he was the Savior. And most of all, it was a time to rejoice. You see, the coming of Jesus was a surprising gift that from God that caused people just like you and I to rejoice. You see, but God's surprising gifts didn't end there. The hope of Jesus is the promise that the blind will see, the lame will walk, the sick will be healed, the dead will be raised, and the poor will receive good news. You see, it's surprising news because God isn't impressed with our ability to follow the rules. Jesus came to change everything. And when he came, he defied the customs, the expectations, the rules, the laws of the universe to miraculously change everything that we knew. You see, God's gifts can be surprising, and because they're surprising, they can cause us to rejoice. So now Jesus promises to bring healing, salvation, and love to the whole world. Those promises were fulfilled on his arrival to earth, but they continue today. Maybe this is a weird connection to make, but when I see the work of Jesus and what he does, it reminds me kind of what happened in the movie The Grinch. If you're not familiar with the story of the Grinch and how the Grinch stole Christmas, let me fill you in. You see, the Grinch was angry, he was bitter, he was an outcast who lived outside of a town called Whoville, where everyone there, like me, loved Christmas. He tried to ruin Christmas for the people there by stealing the things that mattered to them. The presents, the food, all of the holiday fun, the joy that comes with Christmas. But on Christmas morning, the Grinch expected to hear cries of grief and anger, but instead, he hears this. Check out this video.
Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came.
Somehow or other, it came just the same.
Mr. Grinch!
and the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling.
How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags.
And he puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before.
Maybe Christmas
He thought,
doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more.
Max! Help me! I'm feeling...
and what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day.
You see, in this movie, the people of Whoville knew that Christmas was so much more than the presents and the gifts and all of that stuff. You see, it was about something more. And when the Grinch saw how their lives were transformed by love, his life changed. Now, there's no mention of Jesus in this movie, of course, but it's kind of like the life change that Jesus brings and is available to you and I. You see, God's people thought that they were waiting for an earthly king or a political leader to save them, but the Savior they got was so much more than what they were expecting. See, Jesus didn't come to this world to make a political change. He came to make changes in our lives. He can heal us from our bitterness and anger and selfishness. He shows us that we're loved. He shows us that He can help us find peace. He changes our lives from the inside out. So this week, let God surprise you with the gift of Jesus. You see, just like everything came 2,000 years ago, He's still changing everything today. And that right there is a reason to rejoice. So remember to rejoice. As you go about this week, remember to rejoice. Rejoice when you get extra fries in your Whataburger meal. Rejoice when your teacher says, you know what, today I'm not going to give you any homework. Rejoice when your mom makes you your favorite food for supper. Can you imagine how your heart might change if you thank God for the small things that you're given each and every day? That's the kind of gift worth celebrating and making part of this Advent season.